Yeah, so Embodying Wild is my coaching platform, and it's a mix of virtual courses, one-on-one work, but then also I live in Montana on a ranch near Yellowstone Park, and so I host retreats here at the ranch, and also one-on-one sessions with folks who come out to work with my herd of horses. So I offer equine guided empowerment, it's called. Um, and you know, I guess the kind of ethos nugget of Embodying Wild really is, for me, it's been guiding women back to their wild and empowered selves. Because that's been my journey of feeling very tamed, quote unquote, and waking up to that and realizing in that process of like giving away my power to society, to the rules, to the education that I received, just the way that I was conditioned in the world that we live in, that so much of my voice, of course, and this is the experience of so many women in our world, you know, I had given away my right to my boundaries, my right to say no, my voice, my right to be, you know, unique and individual and different, and just all those qualities that I think is the whole reason we come here in the first place and incarnate into this lifetime, is to embody that wild self, right? Which to me, the wild self is it's just our most authentic, free, and in touch, like attuned self, right? In touch with our instincts and our intuition and the messages that our body is sharing.
I just wanted to share the first lines of this Mary Oliver poem, which
yes,
I
please,
read and just thought I have to contact Emily. This, for me, summarizes kind of like a huge takeaway from what I've learned from you. So the first line: I don't want to be demure or respectable. I was that way, asleep for years. And I just felt like, yeah.
Wait, which poem is that?
It's called I Don't Want to Be Demure or Respectable.
Oh, that's what it's called. That's the title.
That's what it's called. And then the book the collection that it's taken from is called Blue Horses, which
I have that one.
Yeah, yep. Just so fitting because you know, horses they're your powerful kind of spiritual creatures.
Yeah, she was very much a student of nature, Mary Oliver, and so I love her work. It's all over my website, and and there's several ones that I are kind of just ones that I always come back to.
Yeah. Which ones?
Wild Geese, of course. You know, the line, you don't have to be good. You don't have to walk on your knees repenting for 1,000 miles through the desert, wherever it is. You just have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. And there's another one called Today. I think it's called Today that I love. Let's see. Yeah. And there's a line in it where she says, I mean, it's just basically a poem about her doing nothing for a day. And
so it's so interesting because I guess I really want to highlight that for me, Embodying Wild, and it's just something that you've really brought to my attention over the last decade, is how important it is to kind of rebalance this feminine and masculine energy within ourselves and within our culture and society. And I just love to hear how you would define masculine and feminine. I've had conversations with friends who just are, you know, they find those terms repellent because they just hate the linguistics of, you know, they hate using the word feminine or masculine, and you've been able to really articulate it in such a just clear and simple way. So I'd love you to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's interesting when people have that reaction, because I wonder what the associations are that are happening there. But I mean, if we look to any ancient philosophy of wisdom or of healing, like traditional Chinese, like medicine, then we have the yin and the yang, right? In Ayurveda, you have Prakriti and Purusha. And these are like the masculine, feminine energies, and they are energies. They're not genders, and obviously they're reflections of gender, right? But they themselves are energy, and they exist in everything, right? That is alive, because these two energies together are what gives birth to creation. And the masculine, I mean, they're subtly different in each of these traditions, but the basis is like, we could think of the feminine, right, as like just the potential, like, right, it's the potential that hasn't birthed yet. It's everything that's under the surface. In Chinese philosophy, the yin is the dark side of the yin yang, right? So it's like it's the fertile soil out of which life arises, right? And the masculine energy is what we can think of as giving that a structure. In Ayurveda, you'd say it's the witnesser of this kind of chaos and flux, which is the feminine, right? And the masculine is that like ability to witness, which is like we could think of as human consciousness. Okay. So I mean, there's like so many different ways to think about these energies.
Yeah, of course.
But the way that I really think about the two of them is, for me, the feminine is that ability to receive, right? To be in that like receiving mode. Oh, we have a timer.
Yeah, if it cuts out, we can
just invite me back
and then just come back into it.
A friend of mine has this happen.
I haven't upgraded my thing, that's why.
Okay. So yeah, that energy of like being in the receiving mode, right? Which is very yin, which is like that Mary Oliver poem I was just talking about called Today, where it's like, today I'm flying low. She starts it off with, I'm not saying a word. And it's this poem about her basically being in like a meditative state, right? Where it's like, I'm just going to be in my body. I'm not going to actively do, right? So we can think of the feminine as that like inaction, and the masculine is the action, right? And
I feel like our culture has demonized nothing. Like if you're resting, you're a lazy sloth, and you're
right.
Like, it's so tough to kind of live that way.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I boil it down to for myself, is like that yin energy is the receiving, non-doing, being state, which is so necessary, which is what you're saying. We've forgotten our connection. We've forgotten how to value that state of being. And the masculine is the action that is really designed to arise from that state of being, right? We go inward, we get the guidance, we connect to our intuition and our instinct, and then the action arises out of that, right? And that is how we are able to live in like a flow state.
Yeah.
But our conditioning tells us that we have to be on all the time, right? Like the laziness, the constantly being productive, the needing to be striving for something and achieving something, all that.
And I think that's why those people have such a strong reaction against these words, because our culture has devalued the feminine to the extent that it's ingrained in so many of us to kind of abhor the qualities that are have been associated with feminine energies. And I feel like your work is about helping women to like rediscover that and learn to love that, like to love these like fundamental aspects of ourselves.
Because that is our essence as women. That's our superpower, is how I like to think of it, right?
Could you share any, like, not naming any names, but like, could you share any of the challenges some of your students have faced, and how they've learned to face those and kind of overcome them through your work?
Well, yeah, it definitely runs the gamut, because I've had women of all ages at this point come through the course from, there's kind of like the two camps, which is like, I'm searching for my purpose, like at this more like maiden to mother stage of life, right? Where, it is kind of that like late 20s, early 30s, even into our 40s, right? Like I've had this career path for a while, or, just for the first awakening of I've lost touch with myself, which isn't the first, actually. For a lot of women, it happens after their children leave the nest, right? And finally they have that space. So it's always this theme, regardless of age, of like, I realize I've been giving away who I am and giving away my power and my right to be me for so long, for most of my life, right? And I'm ready. I'm at this point where I'm being very clearly pointed in the direction by the universe of it's time to come home. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that gives me like chills, it's just
yeah.
like I look at Lula and I just keep thinking, how do I maintain her connection to herself? It's so strongly there, but like, how do I maintain that for her? Because I never want her to, I guess I was about to say, I never want her to like lose touch with it or lose her way, but I suppose that's also part of when I look back on my journey, getting really lost was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Come home to myself.
I mean, it's part of the human experience, and we can never avoid it. It's like, if you really look into like any spiritual tradition, the idea is like we fell asleep so that we could have the experience of waking up again, because of the beauty of that journey. And that is basically what it means to be a human walking this earth, right? Regardless of whether you're living in our culture or, more. I mean, I think what a lot of us, and, definitely with this idea of the wild coming back to, is like how indigenous, more hunter-gatherer cultures live in rhythm with nature and in rhythm with the earth. And there is a big difference in the well-being that is available from living that way as opposed to how we live. And there's also a spiritual component that's just baked into living life that way, right? So you don't lose touch with this understanding that, okay, part of being here on this earth is to experience suffering, right? Like the Buddha talked about. It's just, so you can't maintain it for her. But what you can do is guide her whenever she comes to you with questions back to her own inner guidance. And remind her to listen to her inner guidance and to herself, right? So it's that.
I guess, you're touching on intuition, and how I have thought, I have to lead from my intuition, because at least then I'm showing her that that is possible. Because for such a long time I found it so difficult to not just act on my intuition, but like even just to hear my inner, my inner guidance. And I was wondering if you had any, firstly, how would you define intuition, and also how could you offer any tips for people on how to listen and act on their intuition?
I mean, I do think of it like, just like we would go to the gym to try to strengthen a muscle. Like it's the same thing with our intuition, right? We haven't been using it or flexing it, so to speak. Then the voice is pretty quiet, and there's going to be a lot of like, well, was that my intuition, or was that just like this voice or that voice? And just also allowing the process to be a little bit messy and an experiment, I guess, to begin with. But intuition comes through your body. It does not come through your mind, is what I have discovered, right? Like it starts in the body. So starting to connect to what you feel rather than what you think. So there's a stimulus, there's a choice you have to make. There's something that falls onto your path that's asking you to make a choice, right? And so where do we want to go? Up here, all the pros and cons. What does this person think? What's that person going to think? What's that going to mean 5 years down the road? Right. And then we're just totally disconnected from the body.
Yeah.
Which is a symptom of our culture, right? It's just how we're raised.
Yeah, on our education, we don't have like semantics at school. It's just like
right.
Completely.
And our obsession with science too, right? And that everything has to be this like, you know,
I know, linear, like
cause and effect. Yeah. And missing that piece of the magic that is our intuition, right? And that there's a path that is uniquely for us. It doesn't matter what this person over here is doing, because they're on their path. So our path is trying to guide us where we are uniquely desiring to go. And so if we're not listening to that inner guidance, then Joseph Campbell always says, or he said, if the path before you is clear, then you're probably on someone else's. So that's how I like to think of like what the intuition, the reason we have such a hard time listening to our intuition is because it's not giving us the 10-year like plan, right?
Exactly, which is terrible for all of us.
It's giving us one step.
Yeah.
And we might not like where it's asking us to go too.
It never does. Wait.
Right. So our
never leads you in a comfortable direction.
No,
it's
usually
annoying.
not.
It's so annoying.
It's like yes and no, because it's what feels best for us ultimately.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah,
but for the ego, it's going to ask us to expand out of what feels safe. But what feels safe reaches a point where it doesn't feel comfortable.
But I wondered if you could share times when you haven't followed your intuition, and maybe like the time when you have, and what that's felt like.
Well, I mean, what I'm doing now is a career shift. So my initial career path was in film. And I was living in LA, pursuing a career as a screenwriter. And since I was a little kid, as you know, that had been my love, was like film and theater, and I'm going to be a director and writer someday, right? And when I got there, right, and it was all happening, and I was like, I had a manager, I was like going around Hollywood, like on meetings, right? But I felt miserable. And I wasn't writing. I was very blocked at that point too. And this also was like tied into losing a lot of my own connection to my intuition, and also my self-confidence and my self-worth. Like it was very much a dark night of the soul moment in my life. But my intuition was certainly letting me know, and my body, because I started getting physically sick, was letting me know this isn't it, right? Like you got to turn things around. And all I wanted to do was read psychology books and spirituality books, and I was just obsessed with healing. Part of that was because I knew I needed to heal, right? But that's where my soft animal, my body, if we're going to talk about that, was pulling me. And following that intuition was like terrifying, because it meant I was going to be letting down everyone who had believed in me up until that point, particularly my parents, who had invested so much in my education, right, for me to get to this place. And it was just, I knew everyone was going to be like, huh? Like, you're at this point and you're going to say no?
Yeah. And
so, that was a huge leap. And I didn't do it in a clean, like, nope, I'm listening to myself. It was messy. It was like kind of sneaking like away from the past life into the new one. And like, but that's how I had to do it to feel safe. It was a gradual thing. But eventually.
So interesting. I mean, like, it's, obviously we have such a similar, like, kind of parallel, like, unfolding. And I've had many moments where I thought back and been like, Sophie, why didn't you just, you started taking that one step because you were trusting in yourself and following your intuition, and why didn't you just continue and stay. Because for me, it was like 1 step forward, 3 steps
Yeah.
back,
Yeah,
1 step
exactly.
forward, 3 steps back, 1 step forward. And so just hearing you there, it, gives me the permission to just really be proud of my journey and my, the
Yeah.
time it has taken me to get to where I am. And I'm very much still
Yeah.
on my path.
Yeah. And we always are. And so I think that's something, to the patriarchy, which you mentioned, like, and that paradigm, it holds us to impossible standards, right? And that's part of breaking out of this box that we've been put in, especially as women, but just in general in our culture. It's like, it's not okay to be human, and like, of course, like it's a process, and it's not designed to be linear, as
Not, yeah, not
right?
at all.
For me, this has really come through in my journey with my horses, because I have switched out of the traditional horsemanship model, which is it's a parallel for what we're talking about. It is a dominance-based power over having complete control over their bodies model, right? Where we use them for our sport, whatever it is that we need them for. And the model that I am following now, which is a philosophy created by this woman in Germany, Sabina Berman, it is about being in relationship with them, right? And so it's not a formula. It's working on the relationship, right? And you don't know what's going to come out of any session or day with them, right? Because you're just working with whatever horse shows up, and it's not about, I need you to be able to do this, so we're going to do this, this, and that. It's
for
about
a specific goal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you can have those goals, right? Like, I want to ride them, and I want to, be able to go do certain things, and
Yeah.
but not at the expense of like authentic connection.
I feel like there's also such a parallel with the Alexander technique and the work that you've been doing with horses, because what I learned with Uri was that in order to rediscover my nature, like my first nature, I had to unlearn so much, like all that training, all that conditioning that I guess is what you also have to I know you've worked with horses, or you have a horse that had been kind of abused.
Yes.
In the way that it had been trained and conditioned, and your work like has enabled, if I'm right, him to unlearn that training and that conditioning in order to kind of come back home into his wildness. And I suppose that relationship with you and him is the healing like vehicle, in the same way that it is with a practitioner and client, like or the facilitator and the client.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's still very much a process, that his trauma, unfortunately, is very deep.
Yeah.
So he, more than any other horse or person in my life, has taught me patience, and that, and really having to manage my expectations, right? And probably make them, like take them down from here to here. Because it's just, it really is a process. And with horses, like the way most of them are trained, they end up with what's called learned helplessness, where they learn, like, no matter what I communicate, I'm not going to be heard.
Wow. My goodness.
And we can think of that for ourselves.
There's so many parallels. Yeah.
So for him, the biggest thing is like, no, I actually do want to hear what you have to say, and I care.
Yeah, and I really, really care. How do you do that? How do you establish that new relationship with your horses? Like, what do you have to do in yourself and in
in myself? like constantly telling that voice within me that's like, just make him do it, just push him through, to like, shut up, you know, because that's not what this is about, right? The pushing through, which is a problem I've had with myself in my own body, of like overextending myself, pushing through burnout,
Yeah,
fatigue,
yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah, my gosh, I have that like daily as a mother,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I don't make space to, find a better way for myself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like an example with him would be like putting the pads on his back is brings up his trauma, right? Um,
How does his trauma manifest? Like
he'll
when
back
it's triggered?
away, you know, and now he will, but like at first it might be this thing where he was just totally frozen, but he wouldn't move because he knew he wasn't allowed to, you know. Or if he was tied up and I came at him with a pad, he'd flip himself over. I mean, when he came to us, it was really, really bad.
That must be
So
really scary because,
it's,
they're majestic, big
oh yeah,
beasts.
it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's like I'll walk over and I leave him loose so he's allowed to like communicate. And
How he,
so he'll back away and maybe I'll invite him to take a few steps forward. And it's just this dance we're doing, right?
you see him every day.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. I mean, my horses live right in the pasture outside of our cabin. So I see them out the window and I
Do you
work
have
with
any
them.
kind of, when you're there, do you have like a daily routine? It's not a very manifestory thing to ask, but
No,
like,
I know I don't. Like, between the Pisces and the manifester, routine is always a struggle. But no, I mean I have my things that I do. It's just not the same rhythm necessarily every day, but like taking care of the veggie garden, doing a session with Aria and Soldier, because Aria is my other horse, feeding them and just spending time. And yeah, because we have 10 horses. So two of them are mine, but
that is just incredible because it's also, I've known you for such a long time. I've known you since what, we were like 8, 9 years old. And
yeah.
horses are always like underlying, it was just always this underlying passion.
Yeah,
Of
I
course,
didn't
there was
ride.
the film, but you were just interested in, or did you? Yeah, you loved
Well, yeah,
horses.
because I started riding when I was like 5 years old or something like that. But we never did it when we were in England. A couple of times we went out to like the countryside and
Did it?
took a lesson. But it was mostly when I was back in the States in the summertime, in the winter that I would ride. Yeah.
Um, for somebody like me who doesn't interact with horses, um, like how does it work if I were to come to your ranch and I was to have a session
Yeah.
with you, and which is something I would really love to do.
Yes.
Can you just talk through how that works for somebody who,
Yeah.
like, is that like, I would be a bit nervous.
Sure. And a lot of people are. Yeah. People who haven't been around horses. I mean, and this is what I love, because like people who have not been around horses their whole life and haven't had all this conditioning about overpowering them as a way to be in connection with them,
Yeah.
they come in with that like rightful, like, wow, okay, they're
Honor.
big. And like,
Yeah.
exactly. There's like a reverence and oh, let me just like
Like, I'll take my cue
slowly.
from you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, that's always fun, and people who don't have the background can see the expressions on the horses' faces a lot more clearly too,
That's so interesting.
because they're so expressive and they have a very
Painful.
complex range of emotions. They're like emotionally incredibly intelligent, and this is why working with them in the therapeutic context is so powerful, because they understand what it is to be part of a herd, a community, and that's like where they get most of their safety from. So they're very attuned to what it means to be in relationship.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. um, and they're very energetically sensitive, so they can feel. They don't care what we're saying or how we're trying to carry ourselves. They're seeing through that body language. They see the tension, they feel our heartbeat, right? They can see our breath patterns, and that's what they're responding to.
Wow. Wow. So when you work with someone, it's kind of over time, the way that their relationship with the horse, or the way the horse responds to them, changes, reflects how they are changing internally
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. So like in the course of a session, I usually like have people, we do exercises first that are all about personal space and navigating personal space, because that's a safety thing if we're going to be around horses, but it also holds up a mirror again to what is our relationship to our personal space? Do we think we have a right to it? Are we able to claim it? Like you said before, space claiming, right? Like that's an exercise we do where someone has a rope, they swing it around their body. And how do they do that? Do they do it super aggressively and protectively? Do they do it in this calm and relaxed, this is my space and I get to have it kind of way? Or are they just like holding the rope up here and like, I don't know if this is okay and I'm afraid to hurt people by claiming my
I bet a lot of people are like that.
yes, and a lot of women, right? And so it's a beautiful exercise for women to get to do. And that's what I love about working with horses, because pushy horse is just going to blow right through your space.
Yeah.
If you're not
Claiming it.
yeah, exactly. So we do a bunch of somatic exercises that just help with that sense of personal space and dropping people back into their own body so they can access what actually feels right for them and what doesn't. How close do they feel comfortable being, versus not. And then we spend time with the horses out in the pasture, and it's very open, and it's like, who do you feel drawn to? And then observing like the herd dynamic and learning from how they interact with one another. And then normally there is a horse that connects with the person. And it's always so interesting to see that, because I know their personalities. So it's always reflecting something of that horse's journey,
That's so beautiful.
It's really cool. It's really magical. And my job really is just like connecting that person back to what's happening inside their body, right? As opposed to what's going on up here. And reflecting what I'm seeing in the horse's behavior, right? In relationship with them. Because horses just give us such a clear reflection of what they're sensing from our energy.
I can't wait to come and have this experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt that way for such a long time. I mean, what would you say are your biggest lessons from the work that you've been doing with horses?
That when I'm not being true to myself, I create a very unclear energy field around me, and it doesn't feel safe for them. It's not like an open channel for connection. That's probably one of the biggest ones. And accepting that feedback when it's coming at me.
I was about to say, like, that literally sounds like me and Alex.
Yeah.
It makes me feel so unsafe. He's like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, instead of projecting it out and making it the horse's fault or your husband's fault, right? Which I do that as well. Okay. All right. What is this reflecting to me? What do I need to go and check in with in myself? And this doesn't mean that I'm wrong. I have a part of me that really likes to tell very dramatic stories about disconnection, right? And when I'm not, which is really just when I'm not getting what I want out of them, right?
So similar. Yeah.
And so it's you also taking a look at that, like, what am I making this mean? How am I blowing this up? And probably underneath that is judgment towards myself that I need to release. And then just slowing down always is the lesson, right? Going way slower than you think you should be going, right? So the shoulds are always going to be such an important reflection for us.
Yeah.
to our conditioning and to the ways in which we've been disconnected from our inner guidance, as we've been talking about our intuition.
How can people find you? They can find you on your website and Instagram.
Yes. Embodyingwild.com is my website.
I'll
And then
and also I'll share
Instagram.
your podcast that I haven't listened to yet, but I cannot
Horse
wait
Time.
to listen to it.
Yeah. So it just came out with a podcast last month, or was it the beginning? It was the beginning of this month. Yeah. And so it's called Horse Time, and that is with a friend of mine, Carla Lanvier, and it's sharing our journeys with our horses and
Amazing.
kind of all the spiritual self-development lessons that we
I can't wait to listen to that. I feel like we only really touched on it. Obviously so much more that can go into.
Yeah. And then so I offer one-on-one sessions here at the ranch. I do them virtually as well. And we have a couple like clinics and retreats that are happening at the ranch this summer. So it's all on my website.
Oh, well, I'm going to just stop recording now.